Hey everyone, welcome to our study this week on Vayera. This portion is over Genesis 18 through 22, and Vayera means "and he appeared." The first words of the passage there, talking about the Lord appearing to Abram, and it says, or Abraham. It says the fourth reading of the book of Genesis is named Vayera. It means "and he appeared" because the first story describes how the Lord appears to Abraham one day as he sat outside of his tent. Vayera continues with a series of the tests of faith for Abraham, including in one great and final trial, concluding rather in one great and final trial that we're going to talk about today. Here's the overview that we're going to go through most of these things here. We're going to talk about several things that happen. I'm approaching this one a little different this week. A lot of times I'll go through and pull out specific things and we'll study those things. But there's something that I noticed in this particular section that I thought was really good for us to look at. And that is this: there are several very difficult questions to answer for us as believers in these passages that we probably need to be able to reconcile in our own faith, in our own mind and heart, but also be ready to give an answer to people when they ask about these things. So that's how we're going to take and approach this. You guys can talk about whatever you'd like, obviously, but for this particular study, that's how I wanted to approach it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this idea that Yahweh is not answering prayers or fulfilling his promises. Okay, there's a very real feeling here that there is something that Yahweh has promised to Abram and Sarai, and it's an impossible promise, right? It's something that they can't manufacture, they can't figure out. Her womb is closed. He's supposed to be this father of a great nation. He's supposed to be a great people, and it seems almost like a cruel promise to give to these two people. So we're gonna, and we already know that they tried to figure it out on their own, right? They tried to do the Egyptian thing and bring Hagar in, and that just backfired and has been a horrible idea, as it is most of the time when we try to intervene and do the Lord's job. But that's what we're going to look at here, and we begin in chapter 18, beginning verse 9. It says this: we have the three men that appear. Abraham sees them from his tent. He races out to meet them right after he's been circumcised also, which is a great feat. And he brings them into the house. He feeds them. He does all this stuff. There's a lot of prophetic things there we're not going to get into in this particular study. But it says this: these men say to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And Abraham said, "There in the tent." And he said, "I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent door, which was behind him. And now Abraham and Sarah were old. They were advanced in age. Sarah was past childbearing. Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have become old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also." So we have this setup here where there is a promise given once again. They've been hearing this for a long time. We're going to look at just how long in a second. And Sarah laughs because she feels like this is almost cruel at this point, because I've been told this over and over and over, and it's not happening, right? And she doesn't believe it. I don't know. Maybe she doesn't believe it. She's struggling to believe it at the very least. Verse 13 says, "And the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I indeed bear a child when I am so old? Is anything too difficult for the Lord?" Notice what it says here: at the appointed time, I will return to you at this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah denied it, however, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And he said, "No, but you did laugh." Okay, so, we've all been in a situation like this. I want you to think about this throughout this study, but think about something that you've heard that was an impossible promise from the Lord, either something that he promised you or something he promised someone you know. And think about how ridiculous it sounded in your mind. Maybe you laughed out loud, maybe you didn't, maybe you laughed on the inside, but the reality is maybe later it came to pass. There is something I had a vision or a dream about just a picture in my head about that I believe was from the Lord when I was 19 years old, praying and walking down the streets of the inner city in Dallas, Fort Worth, Dallas area. And I had this vision in my mind of something that I felt like the Lord wanted me to do. And I have spent the last 25 years trying to make that happen. And I'm just realizing the exact amount of time that I've been waiting for this to happen. And it's actually beginning to come to fruition right now after I kind of stopped trying to make it happen, which is ridiculous. Anyway, sorry, I'm actually literally just getting that in my head right now, realizing what the Lord is doing even right now as I'm talking on this recording right now. Sorry. Let me get back to the presentation here. So she's embarrassed because she laughed, but let's look at what they're dealing with here. So Abram was 75 when in Genesis 12:4 he gets the promise that he's going to be, you know, like the sand of the seashore, the stars in the heavens, if you can count them, that's how many descendants you're going to have. And nothing happens for 10 years. So finally Sarah's like, hey, here's Hagar. Maybe I'm going to have kids through Hagar. And they try to do it on their own. And he has Ishmael when he's 86 years old. And they realize this was us. We made this mistake. We tried to make it happen on our own. And the promise comes in Genesis 21, but it doesn't come until he's 100 years old. 25 years of a promise, when the promise was given, he still thought he was too old for this promise. But then it took another 25 years. And then this promise comes. It's kind of a ridiculous thing if you think about it. But the reality is, God, what it said in that verse in chapter 21, verse 14, he had an appointed time and there was something that he was preparing to do. And we have to get on the same schedule as the Lord. Notice what it says in Genesis 21 again. It says, then, in verse 20, chapter 21 now, not chapter 18. This is when it happens. It says, then the Lord took note of Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. So Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the appointed time. There it is again. At the appointed time of which God had spoken to him, Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. In Hebrew, it's Yitzhak, and Yitzhak literally means laughter. So it's like this. What started as a disbelief actually becomes the name of the promise, which is kind of cool. So what does that appointed time mean? Was it just a time on the calendar, or was there a test that he had to go through again? Because what we didn't read in chapter 20 is that Abraham goes through the test again after he becomes Abraham, because he was Abram for a long time. God makes the covenant with him again, gives him the Hay in his name, which is very significant, but we don't have time to go into that right now. But he is Abraham now, and he takes him through the same test again. In the same way he went down to Egypt because he was afraid, and then he told Sarah, or Sarai at that point, hey, tell him you're my sister, because he was afraid that they might kill him. The same test happens again when he goes to the land of the Philistines in Gerar. But he had made a little progress at this time, because this time we don't read that he was afraid. This time he actually introduces Sarah. He does still introduce her as his sister, but there's no fear there. It appears that maybe he wasn't as the first time it appears like he may have even brought Sarah to the palace of the Pharaoh in Egypt. But this time it almost seems like Abimelech takes her from Abraham. And then we see this a different dynamic here. So he had made some progress. There's an idea in the Hebrew alphabet, that if you look through all of the different letters and what they mean, there's 22 letters, and that's the cycle of life that we go through. And when we get stuck on a letter, or we fail a test, or fail to pass that particular idea that the Lord has for us, we get stuck on that letter. We have to cycle back through, because he has something for us to do. I think that bears out in Scripture. When we fail a test, I think the Lord continues to test us in that area to get us to a place where he can trust us with that promise. And that's what he had to do with Abraham. and Sarah. He had to get them to a place where he could trust them with the promise that he had given them 25 years earlier. And that was the appointed time. So pretty cool. But that's kind of how we look at that question. He did answer. I had a verse in here. I guess I took it out, but there is a verse in the book of Peter that says that God is not slow in answering his promises the way we think of slow, but that he has a plan and he is faithful to fulfill every one of his promises. Okay, the second big question here that comes up in this passage is, why is Yahweh destroying an entire groups of people? We see it in different passages of the Bible, but we see it here in Genesis 18, and it's pretty significant because we're going to see Sodom and Gomorrah. We're going to see them destroyed, but we have this dialogue in the Christian church where it just seems to be because, oh, they were just, it was because of homosexuality. That's it. Okay, there's a lot more to it. We're going to go into some of it, but we'll get to it here in just a second. It says in chapter 18, verse 22, that those men that were at Abraham's house, two of them go into Sodom, and that the men were there at Sodom while and Abraham takes. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Give me 1 second. All right, we got to go back. Sorry. So Abraham, sorry about that. Abraham talks to the Lord, and the Lord tells him he's going to destroy Sodom because it's wicked. But notice what it says. It says, then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom, while Abraham was still standing before the Lord. And Abraham approached and said, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? All right. And this is kind of our idea of what we think about in our mind when we think about he's destroying this entire group of people, and there's righteous people there, there's wicked people there. How is he just destroying all these people? And so Abraham says, suppose there are 50 righteous people within the city. Will you indeed sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? So he has this idea that God has not considered these things, and that he is going to destroy the righteous with the wicked. But let's play through this story. We have the same idea of something happening in Noah's time. And I don't remember if we went through this in our study this time, but if you go back and look, it says that every person in that place was corrupted. So there was a corruption going on. And what you will find if you really study these different passages, when the Lord is destroying a particular place, it's because of corruption. It's because of a corrupted seed that goes all the way back to Genesis 3, when he says that there's going to be a seed war happening between the seed of the enemy and the seed of Yahweh. The seed of Yahweh needs to remain pure, but there's all of these things that are going to continue to take place with the Watchers, with the Nephilim in Genesis chapter 6. And these things continue to try to take place. What you will find if you study this out, that there are some pretty horrid things that are going on here. And the only righteous people that were ended up being found in Sodom was Lot, and not really even his family. Remember, with Noah, there was only 8 people that were taken on the ark. Noah, his wife, and the 3 sons and their wives. But even those wives were corrupted. So God made an exception. And now here we are in Sodom, and it's just Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters. But then we find out when they're leaving, Lot's wife didn't even want to leave, and she looks back. So it was just Lot and his 2 daughters. Their fiancés didn't even come with them. The ones they were supposed to marry. They said, no, this guy's crazy, when Lot tries to get him to come. So there were literally only 3 people. So there wasn't enough for the Father to save this city. Everybody else was corrupted. And we see this because when the men go, or the angels go into that city, and Lot tries to bring them in, there is a significant thing that happens that shows us this. And we're going to go to that to our next, that's going to lead us to our next point. But I want you to see something. There's a lot of discussion sometimes as why are we not, he's referred to as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why not Noah? Okay, well, one of the reasons that that scholars believe that it starts with Abraham is because Noah never interceded for the salvation of those people the way Abraham did. So when God came to destroy Sodom, you see Abraham interceding, and he is fulfilling that priestly role. And we don't see Noah doing that. Now, maybe he did, but that's the idea there. But now we get to another difficult question, because we see in this next, in chapter 19, we're going to see the angels go into Sodom, and there's something crazy that happens, and Lot offers his daughters to a group of wicked men in place of those two angels. So notice what it says in Genesis 19, verse 4. It says, before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded Lot's house, both young and old, all the people from every quarter. Okay, so we've got young and old, and people from every part of this city are surrounding his house. And they called to Lot and said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may have relations with them. But Lot went out and said to them, stood at the doorway and shut the door behind him. So he's standing in the gap between these people and these two angels that came to him. And he said, please, my brothers, do not act wickedly. So he's trying to intercede. He's trying to take the place here. But notice what he says. Now, behold, I have two daughters who have never had relations with a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and do to them whatever you like. So this is where we have this crazy idea that is hard to reconcile. Only do nothing to these men, and as much as they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, stand aside. Furthermore, they said, this one came in as an alien, talking about Lot, and is already acting like a judge. Now we will treat you worse than them. So there's a threat here. Now, here's what's important to know. There's a couple of things at play here. First of all, remember the corrupted seed theme that we're talking about. So they didn't want to, Lot knew that they had no interest in someone of the opposite sex. Notice these were all men that came out. They were only looking for wicked behavior. Remember in the story of Noah, it says that the deeds of men and the thoughts of men were only evil all the time. We see the same thing here. Secondarily, we see that there was a mixture happening in the days of Noah, where the watchers, the Nephilim, had mixed with the daughters of men. It says the sons of God mixed with the daughters of men and created races of giants. And here you have the same thing potentially happening. They knew Sodom, the people of Sodom knew what had happened then, and now they see divine beings coming into the city, and they think we could do the same thing that they did. That's all they were interested in. And so once again, it was something where Lot was trying to get them to rethink their steps, and it was not working. He knew that they would never take his daughters, but there was just that kind of negotiation happening, trying to get them back on the right path. Look, this is how we do things. It is male and female. It is not male and male, and it is not male, or it is not earth and divine beings mixing together. So he was just trying to get them back on the right path. That's what's happening there. So that one's got a lot of more angles to it, but we'll leave it at that for now. So difficult question number 4. So now we have the angels at the time when they're going to leave the city. They actually make Lot leave, and they say it's an act of compassion. Now let me read this to you so you can see what I'm talking about. It says this in 19 verse 15. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are there, and you will be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he hesitated. So the men seized his hands and the hand of his wife and the hands of his 2 daughters, and for the compassion of the Lord was upon him, and they brought him out and put him outside the city. I wanted to bring that up because there are times where we go through things where it feels like maybe the Lord is seizing our hand a little bit. But perhaps maybe we need to shift our perspective to see that it is the compassion of the Lord that is upon us, that is causing us to move in a direction that's going to get us out of the way of something that might be a little bit heavy. Just something to consider. All right, number 5, we're getting to a close here. How is Yahweh allowing Sarah and Abraham to kick out Hagar and Ishmael? All right, this is a difficult question that we get asked sometimes. So Genesis 21. Now Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian. Okay, that's our first clue. First of all, We're not supposed to be mixing with the world. We're supposed to be separate. And we have an Egyptian here that is in the same house, and it's not jiving because she has Egyptian ways. All right. She bore so she saw Ishmael, the son of Hagar, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking. Therefore she said to Abraham, drive out this maidservant and her son, and the son of this maidservant shall not be an heir with my son Isaac. So, it seems like this is a petty thing, and, my son's going to be first place, not her son. And there's this kind of action going on. We're going to get to the bottom of this in a second, but look at verse 13. It says, and the Lord tells Abraham, I'll make him a great nation, but listen to Sarah, right? And he sent away the boy and Hagar. So he sent away Ishmael and Hagar. So it can seem here like God is not being compassionate on the Ishmaelites, the people that would become the Ishmaelites. But if we look to a little bit of a background story, you can find this in a few places. But if we go to the book of Yasher, and we look in chapter 21, we're going to see something that happens that's pretty interesting, because it's going to explain what that mocking was. Okay, it says, and when Isaac was 5 years old, he was sitting with Ishmael at the door of the tent. And Ishmael came to Isaac and seated himself opposite to him. And he took the bow and drew it and put the arrow in it and intended to slay Isaac. So maybe he was joking in this gesture. Maybe it wasn't real. But it says, Sarah saw the act which Ishmael desired to do to her son Isaac, and it grieved her exceedingly on account of her son. And she sent for Abraham and said to him, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for her son shall not be an heir with my son. So that's almost a direct quote of what we just read in Genesis. And then she tells us why. For thus did he seek to do unto him this day. So she tells him this is what he tried to do. All right. So we see that is potentially what happened there. There are a few other explanations, but I think that one's pretty significant. There was going to be an issue there long term that they had to deal with. Okay. And our final difficult question to answer: how can Yahweh ask Abraham to sacrifice Isaac? Okay, we know human sacrifice is not okay. Man, I apologize. We're going a little bit longer here, but we want to get through this part. In Genesis 22, notice what it says, that God was going to test Abraham. And he said, take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, go up to the land of Moriah and offer him as a burnt offering. Okay, so Abraham did exactly what the Lord told him to. He builds an altar. He arranges the wood. He binds his son. He lays him on the altar on top of the wood. He goes to do it. He says he lifts his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. And then he says, do not stretch out your hand against the lad, and do nothing to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham raised his eyes and looked, and behold, there was a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the place of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. That's the first time the words Jehovah or Yehovah Rapha, Yehovah Jireh, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord that provides. That's what that is right there. As it is said to this day, in the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. So they continued to say that from that day forward, because they remembered this event. So how can this take place? Okay, first of all, let's look at a couple of things. Do you see the fact that he's being laid out on an altar? He's going to be sacrificed as an olay offering, and he's going to get he's laid out on the wood to be sacrificed. Very reminiscent and prophetic of what's going to happen to Messiah. And then we have a ram caught in the thicket, and that ends up being sacrificed, kind of like we have on Yom Kippur, where we have the scapegoat, the Azel goat, and we have the goat that is going to be slain, and one of them gets to go, and the other one is going to be slain. You see that dynamic happening again here, or preceding that, but we see these things beginning to happen and giving us a foreshadow to the future. But I want you to see a couple of verses here. Well, really just one verse that tells us what's going on here. If we go to Hebrews chapter 11, we see something really significant. It says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was offering up his only begotten son. It was he to whom it was said, in Isaac your descendants shall be called. And he considered that God is able to raise people even from the dead, from which he also received him back as a type. So there was an idea, once again, a foreshadowing of resurrection, of new life, of dying to the old, being resurrected as the new. But I want you to hear what this verse specifically says. It says he knew, Abraham knew that even if Isaac did die, that he would be raised up again. So he wasn't afraid to offer his son because he knew about resurrection. He knew that the resurrection would begin, whether it happened right away or later. He knew that this was coming. And I'm going to give you another piece of this in John chapter 8. This is Yeshua speaking, and he says this, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. So we have in scripture here in John telling us that Abraham actually saw the Messiah who was slain and resurrected. And so he knew that the Lord revealed that to him all the way back in his time, and he was looking forward to that day. And in his mind, he knew that that day could very well be the day when he was offering Isaac, that when Isaac was slain, he would be resurrected. And then he found out, nope, that's it. Isaac is not the chosen one. There is one coming ahead, but he rejoiced to see that day. He was excited because he knew that that was going to be an atonement for the sin of humanity. So just a couple of difficult questions there. And now it's time to talk about, I'm sorry I talked so long, but hopefully you guys can have a good discussion and we'll go from there. Shabbat shalom and enjoy the rest of your study. God bless.